You're just being fed through social media, through advertising, all of this information. And then next thing you know, you're buying Coke and not Pepsi. And then you don't even know why you switched over. And I don't know, it gets scary when I think about how much of human behavior is not actually their own conscious behavior.
Especially as you start to apply things like generative AI to marketing messaging and, how do I figure out exactly what the right message for you is?
So, Sean, my first question to you, I saw a presentation on YouTube that you did a few years ago, and you mentioned that the idea for Swiftly came to you during your time at Microsoft when you were working on building the Starbucks app for Windows. So, walk me through the journey of having that initial idea of wanting to empower brick and mortar businesses to the early days of Swiftly.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of times in the VC community, they sometimes talk about founder market fit. You want to find a business that you really enjoy doing and that's meaningful to the founding team. I've always just been kind of really personally interested in the kinds of technologies that you can use in brick and mortar stores for a couple of reasons. One, like I just like shopping and sort of always have. So, I'm the person, some people will be on social media late at night. I'm more likely to be on Slick Deals, trying to figure out like where I can get a good deal and savings. I've always been really into loyalty programs. And I think that's the optimizer kind of engineering mindset of mine. Kind of having those interests. I also really like the brand Starbucks. So I started going to Starbucks when I was in high school. And I'd get their green tea lemonade. And I mean, I had that thing down so perfectly timed. I knew if I could get out of class like 2 or 3 minutes early, I could drive to Starbucks, order something in the store, get it, and then get back in time for my next class. And like nobody would know where I went. I've always liked that brand. And when I was at Microsoft, like we were building the initial set of apps on the Windows platform. So we released an app platform for both Windows Phone back when Microsoft was kind of in the phone game, as well as they called them Universal Windows apps. But that was the app platform that got deployed into Windows 8. Now is still part of the Microsoft Store platform in Windows 11. They had a tough ecosystem problem that Microsoft was trying to solve. They needed all the killer apps that shoppers really liked or consumers really liked to be on the Microsoft platform. And so they put a call out to internal engineers and they said, hey, if there's an app that you want to work on, go and work on that. We'll support you. And let's go build up this app platform so that consumers have a vibrant ecosystem when they come on to the Microsoft phone and app platform. So I picked Starbucks just because I really liked the phone, and I really enjoyed the kind of Starbucks experience with a Starbucks card. And I was on the road a lot, and my like personal problem was just how do I find real Starbucks stores? And what I mean by that is a lot of times I'd be traveling, and you pull up phone, you go to Google Maps, and you search for a Starbucks location, and sometimes it would direct you to like a supermarket that has a Starbucks embedded in the store. And when you go there, one of the things you realize is like they don't quite make the drinks the same. It's a little bit different, and it gets down to the details. It's not Starbucks labor that's working in the stores. It's actually the supermarket's labor that's trained to like operate the Starbucks stand. And so they don't have the same training, the same quality assurance, the same kind of approach to the brand that a real Starbucks store does. And so, that always bothered me. And I thought, well, gosh, what I should do is go build a Starbucks app on the Windows platform to help shoppers find real Starbucks stores, figure out the live hours, because sometimes it's a holiday or a weekend and you're not sure, is this thing going to be open, and get directions to that store. So there's this very simple value proposition, but it was really driven by like my own needs as a consumer, my own kind of insight of like these details really matter, and they matter to the shoppers that are looking to connect with that brand and are looking for that experience. So we started building, shipped that initial kind of mobile application. This concept of like helping somebody to accomplish a relatively like mundane task, but like making a difference in doing that was actually really addictive to me. And, at Microsoft, we had some pretty good telemetry, and, this was all kind of pre-release. So this was before the phone came out, and, we got I got a very good 360 view of what was happening, especially because these were dev builds. So you see the full telemetry from the operating system and all of that. I could actually watch people, Microsoft employees, launch this application, look for Starbucks, look through the hours, filter by what was open, filter by like who had a drive-through, and then, on the location telemetry, see them drive to the store. That's when I realized, like, my God, this is actually driving a lot of value for Starbucks and driving people into these store locations. And, one thing kind of led to another. We kept building on the application. We added mobile payments. We added integrations into the Starbucks loyalty program. And what we found was we were driving, the actual numbers confidential, but what they've publicly disclosed is high single-digit increases in customer quarterly spend. You think about what was the mechanic of what was happening there. Shoppers could always engage with Starbucks loyalty program via the loyalty card. But when you added in a mobile app, that all it did was digitize that loyalty card and show you how many points you have. All of a sudden, you're getting, call it a 7.5% increase in customer spend just from the fact that you made it digital. And, I dug in to try to understand, like, what is this? Like, why is that? There's no kind of one right answer, but our best kind of thesis or theory is that ultimately shoppers, when they're in the store, they're probably waiting in line. They're already on their phone, and it's a little bit easier for them to switch from the browser, like Facebook, to go to the Starbucks app, check out and pay with their app, and then switch back to Facebook, than to put their phone in one pocket or back in your purse, take out your wallet, take out a card, pay with your card. That actually gets shoppers to go into the store more, just removing that little piece of friction. That's really what got me enamored with this kind of commerce and brick and mortar space, is that it's all about getting 1,000 little details right. And when you get those little details right, you can create a delight experience for shoppers that really makes an experience where the consumer is just like, wow, that was so convenient. And, I really like this brand. And then from the retailer's point of view on the business side, it drives real business value. That was sort of the genesis of this. And from Microsoft, I went off to join a startup. And we were the e-commerce platform for a lot of very iconic CPG brands. So our customers were Fiji Water and General Mills and Kraft and Pepsi and Jack Link's Jerky. And we helped them all to kind of build their online e-commerce businesses, and that's really where I realized, like, there's something really special about brands. They all tell a story. They all connect with a person, right? They connect with something in your personality, and that's why people like brands, and that's why people care about brands. It says something about you. But for a lot of the brands that sell consumer packaged goods, it's not economical to buy that online. You think about water, right? Somebody's got to pay to ship water to your house. It's heavy, it's bulky, so your shipping costs are very expensive, versus it's much cheaper to buy water in the store. And so, that insight led me to think, well, gosh, if we could just do what we did with Starbucks, how do I drive shoppers into the store? How do I make that store experience amazing? And then how do I allow brands to participate? Then, I thought that was kind of a really special mix of different areas from a consumer engagement perspective and a brand perspective that, there had to be something there. Fast forward to today, back then, this wasn't a term, but now today people call it retail media. And so it's this concept that retailers are really becoming sort of the technology platforms and the advertising platforms of tomorrow. And, you have the meteoric rise of things like, Amazon was not at all in the advertising game 10 years ago. And now they're the number 3 ad platform. They're bigger than like Twitter, Pinterest, Roku, Snapchat combined, only second to Meta and Google. And, that's really the kind of seismic shift that's happened in the industry. We're really at the forefront of helping to put the rest of the brick and mortar retail space, particularly groceries and convenience stores, on the same playing field as an Amazon is. And, I think that's just a really special place to be. So sorry, that was a very, very long answer to what should have been a simple question, but there's your origin story.
No, I love that. The more detail you can share, the more questions I'm gonna start pulling out. And what I gathered from that is that, one, you're a true avid consumer. That, two, Howard Schultz should definitely sponsor this too. Just like the way that you're talking about Starbucks, I'm just like, is he really working for Swiftly? I don't know. I think he's a Starbucks representative here. So, and I love that, you guys have this mission to empower the brick and mortar businesses. And I'm curious, like, if you can dive in a little bit deeper on how you're doing that. Like, how are you helping these retail stores to have digital presence for their customers?
So, what I would say is I'll take a kind of step back and tell a little bit of a story in answering this. You're in Tokyo right now. You probably flew a major air carrier to get there. Who'd you
Mhm.
fly?
Delta?
Did you pick Delta because you always fly Delta, or was that just the
Yeah.
cheapest
No.
ticket?
No, my friends know I'm like a huge Delta. I'm a big Delta girl.
I'm a slave to United. Um,
Okay. So you
and
know.
it's exactly right. Like, I'll take a connecting flight just to stay on United because I know
Same.
if anything goes wrong, like they're going to take care of me and I'm going to have a good experience. Versus if I'm on somebody else's airline, I don't know what kind of experience I'm going to get. And, you get travel delays, weather, like what's going to happen. People have this incredible loyalty to their airline to the point where they will actually pay more to
Hmm.
fly their preferred airline when the product is actually, it's fundamentally the same thing. You get from point A to point B. Sometimes people will pay more and they'll take a connecting flight. So they'll take a degraded experience
Yeah, that's
just to
me.
be able to. Yes, exactly, right? And so, think about that concept of loyalty. Why don't people feel that for retailers, or do they? We started thinking about that space pretty deeply. And if you look at where you have the opportunity to like really influence somebody's life and especially to reach the mass market consumer, that's grocery, right? It's the number three spend category for consumers. It's housing, transportation, and then food in the home. It's the one thing that whether you're very low income and maybe unhoused, or you're a billionaire, chances are you still shop in a supermarket in America. And so
Mhm.
it's a very, very it's the ultimate mass market penny business. What we started building was saying, hey, how can I create the kind of loyalty that you feel for Delta for my supermarket retailer? I always had this belief that you could be just as passionate about your grocer as people are about their airline. I think I thought that because of my Starbucks experience and what I felt about Starbucks as a brand. And so it's like, why can't I feel that for Lucky's? And why can't I make the rest of the country think the same way? It was funny. We put together our business and we started building our technology platform for retailers. We started working with a few pilot stores and building out this platform. Started bringing technology and the personalization that you can bring to bear with big data, with AI, with the vast amount that you can actually derive just from the purchase data of what shoppers buy in the supermarket to deliver a better experience for consumers. There was one day I was meeting, I had the fortune of meeting Oscar Munoz, who was the CEO of United at the time. And we were sitting down talking about loyalty programs and geeking out over Mileage Plus, right? So there was a part of me that was total fanboy. What I shared with him was, what I'm going to do is we're going to make your supermarket loyalty program just as engaging as United Mileage Plus is. And he shared the story with me. He said, look, like, with respect, I just don't think that there's any way you can get there in the supermarket. I asked him why. And he said, he pointed to my suitcase. And on my suitcase, I had this United tag on my bag. So when you get to 1K with United inside baseball, they send you this little handle that you put on the suitcase. When you put that handle on, if you ever have to gate check your bag, like you're on a Canada Air regional jet, the CRJs, where they don't have the overhead like bin space, you have to gate check your bag. Well, with United, if you have this 1K handle on your bag, they'll bring your bag out first when they're unloading the plane. So you'll be like the first one off and like ready to go. He was telling me like to make this United Mileage Plus program work, I actually have to train my baggage handlers on my loyalty program. And it touches like every person within the organization. And so, how can you do that in a supermarket where you've got a high turnover environment, you've got minimum wage labor, and you've got just the ultimate low margin business? And so, I kind of pointed out to him as I said, well, look at the Starbucks model. Because Starbucks, it used to be this business where your barista knew your name and they knew your drink. But what Starbucks did was they used technology to actually extend that model with their mobile app to where loyalty was created between the barista and the shopper in the old world where you had to know your barista. But with technology, sometimes I go to different Starbucks stores and then the barista there doesn't know me because I'm in a city just for a day. But the app actually knows my name, it knows my drink, it knows my status in the loyalty program, and it gives me that personalized experience. And what we set out to build with Swiftly was to build that same set of technology capabilities for brick and mortar supermarkets, where you can deliver that personalized experience for shoppers and create that loyalty experience. And so that's really the genesis for what led us to build these capabilities into brick and mortar. What we've seen actually is that Starbucks saw the high single digit percentages in customer lifetime value increases. Well, in supermarkets, we're actually seeing about 30% increases in customer spend when shoppers engage with a retailer's mobile app. And a lot of that has to do with just there's just so much more room to sell people more stuff in the supermarket. Like, you think about it, your stomach's only so big. So if I'm at Starbucks, maybe I can get you to go and get one more drink, but there's a limit to how much you can drink unless you're me and it's coffee and I can drink 3 Trentas a day. In the supermarket, I can get you to get one more item in the basket or come in one more time per week and spend $25, $50 on that additional trip. There's so much more opportunity there that the same sort of technology and practices work even better.
Yeah, that's a very interesting conversation that you had with the CEO of United. I'm just like, I think why these airline loyalty programs work is there's almost this air of VIP status to it, right? When you have that tag around your bag, you're just kind of like, oh, I'm gonna, go into priority boarding, and it's a status thing. How do you then bring that to grocery stores? I'm the ultimate VIP shopper at this grocer, right? Very interesting thing to think about, how you can make someone feel VIP at a grocery store.
And, I think a lot of that is not just necessarily your status with the grocery store, but also with the products that you buy. So we have a feature called Challenge Center. And with Challenge Center, what we're able to do is you can create essentially mini Starbucks Star Dashes with the grocers that we support. I could set up a challenge that says, hey, if I come into the store and I buy 5 salads, then I'm going to get my 6th salad free. That goes a long way towards creating customer loyalty and driving digital engagement. But I can actually take that a step further. And as a retailer, I can say, you know what? I could fund my own challenges, like with the salad bar. But what if I can create an ecosystem where I can essentially sell Pepsi the ability to run that challenge targeting my shoppers? So now Pepsi can buy a challenge that says, hey, spend $25 on Frito-Lay products and get $5 back. When you actually look across the industry, this is something that CPG companies have been trying to do for a while. So Pepsi has a program called My Tasty Rewards, where you can go and you can buy Pepsi products. You can take pictures of your receipts, upload it to mytastyrewards.com, and eventually get $5 back through PayPal, I think, or maybe it's a check in the mail. So it's
Wow.
a pretty high friction manual process. P&G has a rewards program, P&G My Rewards. But it's the sort of thing that not many shoppers are that familiar with because there's just so much friction in that process. What we're doing is we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not creating something that's fundamentally new. So it's not like a VIP line at the supermarket. But we're taking those offers that Pepsi and P&G run nationally and just removing all the friction and redeeming that. Where they can work with us, we can deploy that through, we're contracted to work with about 20% of the grocery and convenience stores across the country. Now, as a consumer, I don't have to take a picture of my receipt. I can just enter my phone number at the register. When I want to check my status on that challenge, I'm able to just tap in on my local supermarket app, see how I'm doing, and get my rebate right in the mobile application. So we've really just removed a lot of the friction out and accelerated that kind of time to value from the consumer. And when you think about it, that creates an everybody wins ecosystem. It's a better experience for the consumer, and I end up creating brand loyalty because I'm building up this kind of value and challenges, and I'm an optimizer. So like that naturally appeals, at least to me. Turns out a lot of consumers, have the same sort of financial incentives. It is a better experience for the brand because now they're able to reach not just the shoppers that will kind of jump through a lot of hoops for a discount, but you can really reach the people that you can reach everybody, right? Who uses a grocery app? Well, it's probably the person that spends 80% of their grocery dollar at that retailer. So you're reaching the most high value customers. And then from the store's perspective, that's additional reason to create brand loyalty to their store that actually they don't have to pay for. That's being paid for by the CPG company. Right. And so, being able to kind of create that kind of marketplace, I think is a super special opportunity to be able to take part in because you're, really creating something that benefits everybody.
Definitely. And just going on the topics of grocery shopping and retail, we have companies like Instacart that have been popping up for online grocery shoppings, right? But again, just referencing back to the presentation that I saw that you did, you mentioned that BCG reported 80 to 90% of retail transactions still happening in stores, right? Even with all the growth of what's been happening with e-commerce. So I'm curious from your opinion, like why, with all these advances in technology, why is e-commerce still such a small minority?
Yeah. I don't think there's a single answer to that. I think it's a compendium of things. The simplest answer is just price. At the end of the day, grocery shopping does take quite a bit of time, whether you're doing that or you're hiring somebody else to do that for you. You think about the realities, like labor is very expensive, especially in America. And so you have to pay for somebody's time to do that shopping and picking for you. And there's a premium for that. Ultimately, either the retailer has to pay that or the consumer has to pay that, or it's shared between both, or the delivery provider or the delivery provider's investors have to pay that cost. But at the end of the day, it's just a very expensive affair to pick groceries. And you look at the margins in the grocery business, right? I mean, for most grocery retailers, that's a 1% to 2% net income margin business. So you don't have a ton of margin in there to pay somebody else to both pick those groceries and deliver them to you. And for the consumer's point of view, it's such a price sensitive category, right? I used to have a grocer that would always tell me, he's like, Sean, this business is won or lost on 10 cents on a dozen eggs. That literally a 10-cent price difference in eggs, because it was, it would drive decisions on consumers as to where they would go.
Mm.
Surprisingly, like the supermarket circular, right? The thing that you get in the mail is a very, very material driver of volume for retailers, as there are shoppers that look at different circulars and decide what store they're going to go to and what protein is going to be for dinner this week based on what's on sale. And so that's a big part of that kind of planning cycle for a lot of consumers. And so to take that and say that, hey, we're going to add 10, 20, 30% on the cost of your groceries to pay somebody else to pick that for you is pretty difficult, especially considering that this is the third highest spend category for the consumer. And it's your first discretionary spend category. Right. So, I mean, there's a lot that's been said about kind of the inflation index, right? Food is actually higher on the CPI. So like food inflation exceeds the CPI in general. That's gone up like quite a bit. Wage growth hasn't nearly kept pace with the inflationary prices around food. Just think back to just a few months ago, there were all the stories on the prices of eggs and milk, right? And then you add delivery on top of that. That's a tough thing for the average consumer to stomach, especially in something where, if you need to economize, like one of the first things you can do is try to cut money on your grocery bill because that's just where the spend is for most consumers. So that's one component I think that is a blocker from an e-commerce and a growth perspective. And who knows, maybe 10 years down the road, robotics and automated picking solves that. I know Instacart's making a lot of investments in kind of automated warehouses. So, instead of buying from your grocer and it coming from your grocery store, there's, a robotic warehouse somewhere that does all that picking and potentially a lower cost fashion that doesn't involve paying people. So, maybe that changes things. But I think, there's also an element that a lot of people just enjoy that shopping experience, right? They enjoy going into the store, seeing what's new, right? People call it a market, a bazaar, right? People like going shopping, seeing what's new in the store, what's fresh. There's an experience to picking, like, do I want the avocado that's ripe tonight or the one that's ripe in 3 days? which is like, that's just a hard thing to communicate to, somebody else. And
Yeah.
so, I think that is always going to have an appeal for shoppers as well. And so, I think kind of contrary to popular opinion, that brick and mortar store isn't going to go anywhere. And you see this in the data. There's more grocery stores that are opening. The overall grocery industry is growing. It's not shrinking. This is an area that I think a lot of the investors got wrong, especially in the early days. All the VC dollars, they all went to ecom. And everybody
Mm.
assumed everything was going to ecom. Nobody invested in brick and mortar. We were one of the only companies, certainly in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, that was actually making investments in brick and mortar stores. We were really kind of cutting against the grain there. But, I think especially as we've looked at the e-com penetration data during and post-COVID, COVID was a big acceleration in e-com, and then it actually dropped.
Mm.
And we went back like right along the line of where we would be had COVID never sort of happened. So it's an interesting dynamic and market. And I think that's, again, one of these things that like it's a thousand little details that matter. How do substitutions work, right? Do you get the avocado that you want? What's the price point? And figuring those things out and getting them perfect is hard.
Yeah, one thing with Instacart that always fucks up my order is like if I want to get like 3 bananas or 4 bananas, sometimes there's a shopper who will just give me 4 bundles of bananas. And I'm like, okay, great, we're making banana cake this week. Like, and you actually brought up an interesting point about like, investors wanting to dump a lot of capital into e-commerce. And I can only imagine like, when you guys are fundraising, as you're going investor to investor, like I don't know, like what were some of the feedback that you got? Like I can't imagine how difficult that must have been when the whole market is investing into e-commerce and you're saying, "Hey, invest into what we're doing into brick and mortar." And you guys just, I believe the last round you guys raised was $100 million. So that's definitely no uh, easy task to do.
Yeah, when you're scaled, things are a lot easier. Is really based on your kind of metrics and momentum. But, what's probably kind of most interesting is raising in the early days was really hard, especially our first rounds. You're cutting against the grain, and then you're building a marketplace business, right? And so when you look at like what are some of the most successful businesses out there, they're actually marketplaces, right? Like Google is kind of a marketplace. I got eyeballs and I got advertisers. How do I make a market between the two of them? With, Airbnb, Uber, they're marketplaces. Well, we're actually a three-sided marketplace. So we have to build technology for retailers, convince the retailers to use that technology. Then we have to get consumers to use the retailers' apps. And then we have to get CPG companies to actually buy advertising on that surface, right? In the early days, a lot of the Silicon Valley VCs actually, said like, look, like I like to invest in businesses where there's one thing that you have to get
Mm.
right, like one thing that's a leap of faith that I have to believe that your team can achieve. You're asking me to invest in a business where there's three hard
Three.
things that you have to get right. Ultimately, part of what's important is you need to find a set of investors that see the world the same way that you do. And in the early days, we actually went to a lot of people that were luminaries in the CPG industry that, had grew successful CPG companies, also in the supermarket space, because ultimately they knew the problem intimately enough to know that there was a there, right? And so they were able
Mm.
to get comfortable with some of the assumptions that traditional VC wasn't. And that was very helpful for us to kind of build this marketplace business. And then what I will say, too, the other thing that helped is we were very anti-Silicon Valley in the sense that we didn't build a negative unit economics business. So, you think about the delivery companies, right? The ride sharing companies, they all lost billions and billions of dollars on customer acquisition, especially in the early days. Get these companies that would raise billions of dollars and then basically like subsidize that to the consumer and $30 off your first 3 deliveries.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so I'm spending a $60 CAC cost, not even including the advertising, just to get a
Yeah.
single paying customer. That's a tough business to be in, and I kind of see why the investors like it, because the investors end up owning so much of the company because of the amount of money that you have to raise. And that was something that we didn't want to do either. That was in the later rounds that became a really core strength for us because we don't have to spend billions of dollars on CAC cost because we're actually the technology provider. It's actually the retailer's responsibility, and they've got great brands. They've got great user bases. Some of them we work with. I mean, we just did an announcement, I think earlier this week or maybe last week, with a retailer called Deerbergs, family-owned retailer that's been in business, I think, 126 years, right?
Wow.
So, iconic brand and staple of the St. Louis area. And so, you talk about something that everybody knows, right? If you're in St. Louis, you know Deerbergs. We're really able to partner with great brands to bring a better consumer experience to their shoppers. I think that's a core component to how we're able to grow and reach tens of millions of consumers, is really through
Mm.
that power that we created in that marketplace. And that's just a very kind of hard thing to do, but we were fortunate enough to be early enough and to have an insight that let us get there.
That's amazing. Like 100 plus year old grocery store. That's crazy. Um,
It's interesting when you think about timeline, right? Because everything in technology happens so fast, and then you're working with some companies that have been around for so long and seen so much change. I mean, you think about a store that had existed before the invention of the barcode, right? And the kind
oh,
of change
wow.
that
Yeah.
they've gone through, right?
That's crazy. Yeah. Sean, my next question, I want to talk about, the two big giants, Walmart and Amazon. They've truly excelled in constructing like effective retail media networks. And what would you say are key lessons that the smaller grocers or smaller retailers can get from their success, and how this ties into like economic uncertainty and consumer spending habits?
It's an interesting dynamic. Today, Walmart and Amazon have been very effective at monetizing the digital relationship they have with their customers. You think about what that means on a profitability basis. I mean, Lauren Weiner at Boston Consulting Group did some amazing work, and I think I don't want to get this wrong. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think something like 80% of Amazon's profits come from retail media. I think for Walmart, that number is around 12%. We should look that up and make sure I'm getting that right. I mean, it's very, very meaningful from a bottom line perspective. Now, if I'm a regional grocer and I'm not getting any of those dollars, Walmart and Amazon are already hard to compete with from a price perspective, especially Walmart, because they're
Mhm.
another brick and mortar retailer. They're always the EDLP, everyday low price, low cost leader. So if they can take the $3.1 billion dollars they get, might even be 3.7 is the latest, and invest that back into product discounts and undercut me even further, that presents a real existential threat from a competitive standpoint to me as a retailer. Then think about that from the consumer standpoint. I think Americans like choice. I think Americans like having a thriving community of independent and small businesses that is really a core part of kind of the spirit of the country. And I don't think that most consumers want a world where you're only two retailers. As much as people love Amazon and Walmart, I don't think people want a world where that's their only choice. And so, I think people do try to, also shop other stores. And most people, like, they get their grocers from a local supermarket, not necessarily, those kind of big two. And if I'm a CPG company looking at this, like, I think here's how a lot of the CPG companies look at this, because they really need to support a thriving community of independent grocers. And here's sort of why. At the end of the day, look at, any product, whether it be water or soda, chips. The real value of those companies so much is in the brand. Like, can you really taste the difference between water A and water B? Like, maybe in a blind taste test you can, maybe you can't. But a lot of the value is really in that the branding that they provide and that they sell. They need a independent community of multiple retailers to be able to preserve that brand value. And I'll tell you kind of a good story on that. In my last company, we were in discussions with this leading battery company. They had told us that they partnered with Amazon, and they had sold a bunch of their batteries on Amazon, and they co-invested in things like Super Bowl ads to get people to buy their batteries and get them on Subscribe and Save, and to drive people to Amazon's website to buy their batteries. And as Amazon looked at that one day and said, wow, these batteries, this is a great business. And they came out with Amazon Basics batteries. And it
Yeah.
was the same price as the leading national brand, but you got twice as many batteries, right? And so then you go to Amazon, you search for batteries, and what do you see? You don't see Energizer and Duracell. You see Amazon Basics as the first product. And this battery company, they went back to Amazon. They said, well, wait a minute. How can you do? I built this business for you. I ran Super Bowl ads for you. Like,
Yeah.
why am I not the first search result? And Amazon said, oh, don't worry. you can buy ads if you want to be first. And so, that's the challenge that a lot of brands are in, is I think they realize that the big suppliers already have so much power over them. And it's actually one of their lowest margin channels because they get squeezed and squeezed and squeezed by
Mm,
the professional negotiating power that these big retailers can bring to bear. That ultimately, some of their most profitable channels are selling in the independent, in the regional. And so from a investment standpoint and from an advertising standpoint, it's actually to their benefit to spend their ad dollars in a way that it generates a thriving community of independent retailers. And the return that they get when they actually run the math and they look at the profitability of selling a unit in a Walmart versus selling it in their local grocery store, it's going to be more profitable for them to drive that shopper to the grocery store than to the Walmart or to the Amazon. And
mm.
so, they want a world where the independent continues to exist. And so we're in this kind of tension or duality where, you've got these two very well entrenched incumbents. But I think on the ground, people's movement is strong, supporting the independent. And I think people at all levels kind of understand in an intuitive level that that's a good thing for the industry, for the consumer, and for the country. And so I think we're going to continue to see really strong growth and vibrance in our supermarket industry.
And I think the more conscious consumers get in the market too, the more you see people kind of speaking up against, like, for instance, what you mentioned with Amazon, like Amazon taking a lot of these businesses. Like, you're a small company that's marketing on Amazon, and suddenly Amazon's rolling out its own product that's directly competing with you. I think it's angering a lot of people. And yeah, I think as people get smarter as they buy, and I imagine that the market's going to change in reflection of that.
I think so. And I think people want that personal connection, totally random personal story. But, I remember like I was one of the original Amazon Prime members. I used to have one of those accounts where you could have 5 family members on your
What?
Prime account. They don't do that anymore.
Yeah,
But you paid one fee and,
that's like OG
but
status.
yeah. So it's like 2004, 2006, something like that. I think and it had to be before 2006 they came out with this. But back then, if you had an issue with something from Amazon, you could call them. You'd get a real like live human. They would just kind of make it right versus, today I bought a hard drive. It was DOA. You try to go through returning that on Amazon, and then it's like a third party seller. You've got the drop down menus that you're going through, then it's charging you a return fee. You're like, what happened to this area of free returns? Why is there no phone number I can call? Why did this get so hard? Why is it that if I print my own label, I can't have that pickup for free? But if I don't even give you a box and I go to a Staples location, then I can have a free return? Like this makes zero sense.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
versus, I had an issue with a product that I bought in my local grocery store. I totally bought the wrong thing, and like there's a cashier, there's a customer service desk. You can go there, you can talk to somebody.
There's a
There's just a
human.
whole other level of service. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
humans in that business,
yeah.
right? And so, I think people are really kind of wising up to the fact that there are times where you still want that human connection and you still want that kind of local accountability. I think that as we move, in some ways, it's kind of an odd thing for somebody in an AI company that's driving personalization at scale to say, but you really actually need both, right? That human connection isn't going away. It's just doing different things. And that's a strategic competitive advantage that your brick and mortar retailer has that an Amazon's never going to have.
Mm.
And that, I think is really going to be a cornerstone that we navigate as a society as we figure out like how do we exist in the kind of post-human everything's AI landscape with the fact that like we're still humans with bodies that exist in a physical world and like to go shopping.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But, you know, maybe not for long with the whole Vision Pro. Everyone's just turning into robots, and it's interesting where the world's going to take us in the next 10 years. And yeah, I have a couple more questions. Curious,
Yeah.
like what you imagine the future of technology. So I'm going to speak on the technology aspect. So where do you see the world with technology going in the next 10 to 20 years? And then be more specific on the retail side. How do you see retail growing and changing in the next ten to 20 years?
Gosh, 10 to 20 years in technology is a hard timeline to predict. Will we have sentient AI by then that is running our lives for us? I don't know. I can't really call that. I mean, my God, I wouldn't think that things like ChatGPT could get as advanced as they are. But I think, all things kind of fit a curve. So you start off with a general application of a technology. So, when you think about things like the gig economy, right? Like you started off with like Uber, right? And then it became like, well, DoorDash is Uber, but for restaurant deliveries. So, you end up with the increasing levels of specialization. And, I think we're in the very early days of AI being something that's sort of relegated to the kind of largest companies. Everybody thought like DeepMind was, just had such a huge lead. You've got Sam Altman, if you believe the press, out trying to raise $7 trillion to advance AI in a very general purpose way. But ultimately, that's going to get a lot more specialized. And then you get companies like us that we're actually taking ChatGPT and applying that to help you to build a grocery list, to help you to find products in the supermarket, to help you to modify your recipes. So if you need to make something gluten-free or paleo, that, we can help consumers to make the choices that they want to make to live the way they want to live. I think we're going to see acceleration of that trend of people figuring out how can I adapt technology to solve my business problem. And that's how businesses are going to look at it. And ultimately, like businesses are only in business to the extent that they can serve a consumer. At some point, somebody's got to pay the money, right? At the end of the day, that's going to drive us to figure out how do we use technology to solve problems for people. I hope we keep trending in the direction of making things easier and faster and better, and that we get the personalization and loyalty. And, I've virtualized my Starbucks barista end of that experience and less of the, my God, I'd really like to talk to a customer service agent, but there's no humans left. And that's a tough road to navigate. And, I think the next probably 10 years are going to be a lot of experiments as we ping pong back and forth, trying to find what the right balance is there.
And is there a technology that you would personally like to see exist in the next 10 years?
That's a tough one. If my car could drive me and I could like take a nap or be completely on a video call, that would be super cool. I feel like we're so close on the self-driving cars. But, I think, again, that gets back to how do we enable consumers to be able to have the time to focus on the things that they want to focus on and be more in charge of their time and their life. And so, you look at things like, I joke my favorite appliance is the dishwasher because, I hate doing dishes and everything gets super clean. So it's a great kind of time saver and just like quality of life improvement over having to wash everything manually and then like wait for stuff to dry. We've just gradually gotten better and better to where now if I need something to show up in my door in 10 hours or the next day, I can place an order with an e-com provider and it shows up to, then my grocery app being able to predict what are the next things I'm going to need in my pantry and start that order for me. We're only going to get better and better at anticipating consumer needs. And the less I have to think and the more things just happen, then that creates the time and space to focus on the things that are important to you.
There's a comedian, I can't remember his name, but he's talking about like how AI has gotten so good that it's predicting what you would want to buy. And he's like, at some point it's going to get so good that it's going to predict what I want before I even know that I want it. And we should call it not Prime now, but Prime before. It reminded me of that.
Pre-prime.
Yeah, pre-Prime, exactly. Cool. So, Sean, my last question to you.
It's funny.
So you've been on
One
this.
kind of joke on that. We have this feature that we power for grocers. It's called On Sale for You, and it's an AI-based list that looks at the things that you buy specifically in your grocery store, and then it populates a set of suggestions for items that you buy that are on sale or have a coupon available or otherwise like discounted. So it's like your personalized deals.
Hmm.
And we deployed that out to a grocery. And we were talking to some of their customers, and one of their customers kind of we were interviewing, and she was like, you know, I'm seeing so much stuff on this list that I see in my house, and I have no idea how it gets there. I've figured out what my husband is buying. So it's kind
Uh,
of funny that at the
yeah,
end of the day, everything is only as good as the data that you
yeah,
feed it.
of
You get these
course.
intersections with like how people actually behave, and so I think we're always going to be navigating those intersections of human behavior, the sort of perfect data models that machines like to work in.
Yeah, it's scary, like, because so much of that, I'm going to digress a little bit, but like, so much of the data that we're consuming also impacts our day-to-day behavior, right? So you almost become kind of unconscious to your own behavior because you're just being fed through social media, through advertising, all of this information. And then next thing you know, you're buying Coke and not Pepsi. And then you don't even know why you switched over. And, you know, I don't know. It gets scary when I think about like how much of human behavior is not actually their own conscious behavior. We can have a
Yeah,
whole conversation around that too.
yeah, that especially as you start to apply things like generative AI to marketing messaging, and how do I figure out exactly what the right message for you is, exactly what's going to resonate. And it's interesting because we do, when you think about an enterprise sales organization, it's all about getting into the mind of your customer, figuring out what their need states are, figuring out how I articulate the shortest, fastest message to get that idea conveyed to my customer. Now you start to apply generative AI to that, and the level of customization that you can create just increases that much more. And sort of like if you can imagine it, then you can have generative AI paint that picture for you. So we're gonna, I think, get to some pretty scary places where maybe you don't need a neural link to be able to generate new content. That you can actually just talk to a generative AI interface, and it can draw out exactly what you mean in your head. So when I can start to use that in PowerPoint decks, I'll be super excited.
Me too. So, Sean, my last question to you. You've been on this journey with Swiftly for the last 6 years. So, if you can go back in time and talk to Sean from 6 years ago, what's the number one advice that you would give him?
You know, when I started this, I had no like delusions that this was going to be easy, but I also don't think that I realized like just how hard it was going to be. And you think about building any kind of a business or a company, it's always more of a grind and harder than anybody ever tells you it's going to be, or you can expect it unless you've actually lived it. And one of the things that's really, really important is a lot of times really great breakthroughs don't come just at first blush. And it takes iteration, it takes effort, it takes learning, it takes consideration, it takes cycles. And so, just like somebody doesn't expect to write a PhD in a month, you shouldn't expect to build a great company immediately either. And so, it takes a lot of just grit to go through that. And I don't think, I quite recognized just how hard that was going to be. But the message, I would give and what I constantly tell myself is like, well, God, if I could go back 6 years when I was starting this thing and say, like, hey, we'd have 20% of the market, we'd have thousands of brands advertising on the platform, we'd have like all these great stores, like here I'm in the Bay Area, there's like a Lucky's down the street, and like we power their mobile app, their website, their digital ecosystem. That we could build technology like that that's so personal that in the city that I grew up in, like everybody knows Lucky's. We could be in a position to touch that many people. Like, would I trade places? Would I say like, yeah, I want to sign up for that? I mean, absolutely, I would say yes. And so it's important to kind of look back and one, I think, recognize how far you've come, but then also be very cognizant that that doesn't mean that the path ahead is going to be easy, because there's always the next step and the next milestone, and the problems that you have to deal with only escalate and gets harder the bigger you get, and it's a different skill set that you need. Don't give up, right? Keep that kind of grit and determination, because ultimately that's something that I think a lot of people give up too soon. That's why the statistics on failure for companies are so high. And look, I'm all about failing fast, but recognize that some things are hard, and that's okay.
Absolutely. I love that. And that's like the entrepreneurship journey, right? You're essentially climbing Mount Everest and that journey in itself is extremely difficult, but just look ahead to where you're going and just put one step at a time. And yeah, different challenges will come your way, but keep at it.
Even on the worst days, you just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And then on your good days, you can run.
Yeah. Sounds like that's the journey. Yeah. I love
Yep.
that. Well, thank you so much, Sean. I really appreciate your time. And if people want to find you, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, Swiftly, swiftly.com. LinkedIn's probably the best place to follow us for updates. And feel free to reach out on LinkedIn with a message, and I try to respond to everything. It might not be immediate. I'm terrible at immediacy, but I do try to get back to everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much.